Today, we're going to talk about Trump, fascism, and the GOP takeover. And I want to be very clear. That is exactly what we are dealing with. A GOP takeover and fascism being led by Donald Trump. And my concern is that African American people are not aware. In fact, let me use a word. African American people, for the most part, are not woke and don't see what is very obvious in front of us. We are dealing with some folks who have been hard at work at a takeover for at least the last 50 years. And you could say all the way back to the end of Reconstruction when redemption started shortly after the Civil War. And that takeover has been pretty much underplay since then, but it has picked up steam since 2016 when Donald Trump hit the national scene. And although he was not reelected, twice impeached, and now faces felony counts, he is still leading a GOP takeover, and we're going to show you today exactly how it's being done. Stay with us. Hello, everybody. This is Attorney Augustus Corbett, a.k.a. the Minister of Justice. And with me I have
Attorney Chloe Corbett, a.k.a. the Duchess of Justice.
And together we are the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every Saturday we bring you a legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you to defy this unjust legal system. If you're not a subscriber, I ask you every week, why not? What's going on? Why you not on this bandwagon? We are educating and empowering you every single week. Every single week. And so you need to get on, you need to join on, you need to like, share, comment, because again, we're giving you information, folks, that is critical and urgent to the African American community. Today, specifically, we're going to talk about Trump, fascism, and the GOP takeover. There is a GOP right-wing takeover of this nation that is occurring. And what really concerns me, Chloe, is most Black Americans don't realize what's going on. And that's the only thing that can explain why in some jurisdictions, 20%, 30%, 15% of African Americans vote. So in essence, as far as voting is concerned, we're leaving a lot on the table. A lot on the table. And that's exactly what GOP politicians want. That's exactly what they count on every single election cycle, that Black Americans stay home. So we're going to talk about that takeover today, and we're going to show you exactly how it's being done. Before we get in that, let me welcome my lovely daughter and co-partner, the Duchess of Justice, Attorney Chloe Corbett, the best litigator in Texas. What's going on?
What's up, Dad? I am good. I'm good. I'm fired up today. I am passionate about this topic. We were discussing off air just how crazy this takeover is and the fascist state that seems to be arising over the past few years. And it's infuriating. We're going to get into it in detail. So I'm ready to talk about this. I've been doing a lot of research, study about fascism, and there's a lot to it.
Very good. Let's get right into it. We're not going to belabor this any longer. Let's get started.
Let's go. Let's go.
All right, so we're going to begin with the definition of fascism. Fascism is an extreme form of authoritarian rule. Citizens are required to do exactly what leaders say they must do, nothing more, nothing less. The doctrine is linked to rabid nationalism, which is often based on racism. It also turns the traditional social contract upside down. Instead of citizens giving power to the state in exchange for the protection of their rights, power begins with the leader, and the people have no rights. That's anti democratic. Under fascism, the mission of citizens is to serve, the government's job is to rule. That is the late former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright from her book, Fascism, A Warning. All right. So let's break that down. Let's break that down. I'll start with the first part. Authoritarian rule, authoritarianism is another way of looking at it. What does that mean? That means basically one person is an authoritarian power, a dictator basically. And as far as the GOP is concerned, that one person is Donald Trump. Donald Trump still has control, majority control over the GOP electorate. So fascism starts with authoritarianism, not, a Congress and other branches of the government. No, one person in control, like the Soviet, like Russia. Pardon me, I almost said the Soviet Union, but Russia, like China, like Saudi Arabia. One person in control of the government. That is the first aspect of fascism.
Yeah, one historian, when I was reading up on this topic, he pointed out too that with the authoritarian control, historically, it did start out, the control started out democratically. So if you go look to Nazi Germany and look at the Nazi Party, which Hitler was the head of, the Nazi Party were elected by German citizens. So they were democratically elected. It's once they got into office and began to decay and deride various protections from Germany, where we see that the authoritarianism, began to arise. The same with Mussolini out of Italy. So it can be, a party is democratically elected, like the Republican Party with Trump in 2016. Yet the various ways that they use to keep their place in power and authoritarianism, that's when it can become fascism. And we're going to go into that detail as well. So don't get it twisted. You may think, hey, in the United States, we elect our officials, we elect our presidents. That does not mean that America cannot become um go down into a fascist state, because history shows that it can start with democracy and then convert.
Well, it almost happened this last election cycle when Trump sent out his people and they showed up at the Capitol building and stormed the building. Had they gotten their hands on the votes, or Mike Pence, or what's her name, former Speaker of the House,
Pelosi,
Nancy
Nancy Pelosi.
Pelosi, had they gotten their hands on either of those two people, or on those boxes of certificates, then Trump would have been in the presidency as of now, potentially. So it almost happened.
You
And
did.
that would have set aside our national election. That would have set aside the court system. That would have set aside. So we came that close to seeing the establishment of authoritarianism through Donald Trump. And Chloe, before the election, we saw him do everything he could to undermine our democratic institutions, right? He disparaged the FBI. He disparaged the CIA. He disparaged, all these agencies, the Department of Defense, our election system. He disparaged all of that. Why? To basically to erode, as you said, to erode the confidence that the American people have in our democratic institutions. Why? Because him and the GOP want to establish authoritarianism on the road to fascism.
Yeah, and it's almost like two contrasting positions, that because fascism relies on establishing authoritarianism, but it also relies on, mass control, mass population, no political dissent, a lack of information, the lack of truth. So the authoritarianism, the dictator relies on the masses being uninformed and there being no political dissent. And we're going to get into that with what happened with the Tennessee Three. So it's like these contrasting polar opposites that you have as well that we're seeing today.
Absolutely. All right. So the next facet of fascism is the doctrine of nationalism. And in this case, let's be even more specific: white Christian nationalism. Okay? Not just nationalism, but white Christian nationalism. So, Chloe, talk to us about nationalism.
You know, nationalism is, to me, I define it in layman's terms as being an extreme pride in one's country, one's cultural identity. And here in America, the country itself was established based on white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people. So that is the national identity of this country, from 1776 until now. Now we know that America existed before in different forms with indigenous groups. There were other countries, the French and the Dutch, who had established colonies here. But what we know as America today is that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant identity. And if you don't identify with that identity or you critique it, then it becomes okay, you're woke. And and fascist America, what is becoming being woke, is it's like you're attacking the national identity of America. And that is one of the ways that, you know fascism in American, and what Trump wants to happen is any critique of America, any dissent from that white Protestant nationalism, you become anti-American, you become part of the other. That is a key component of what Trump and the GOP are trying to do with this takeover as well. So if you speak up like us, if you have any critiques about America, against white racism, white privilege, against colonialism, against neo-Nazism, then you become other, and not a part of this national identity. So it's really sad to see, and you see it all across the country as well, with the way that the GOP has taken over school districts, state legislatures, etc. It's happening day by day, every day.
Very good. And anti democratic. As I said earlier, fascism, we saw Trump just attack everything. I mean, he attacked all the institutions that make this country the America that we know it is. Now he's attacking the Justice Department, but he also weaponized the Justice Department when it served his interests. Um, so, anti-democracy, anti-democratic tendencies are running very strong in the GOP. The GOP are essentially following whatever Trump does, whatever he says, no matter what it is, they fall in line. Um, and it is very, very, very dangerous to our country because Again, if you take the FBI, if you take the Justice Department, the Education Department, the Federal Reserve Bank, the CIA, the Department of Defense, if you mine those institutions, then we are no longer a a republic, a democratic republic. We become again like Russia, where all the power is centered in one person, in one party, in nationalism, and a nationalism, as you said, Chloe, that is defined pretty much by European white Protestant people. And then we also see them sort of wrapping all of that nationalism up, that white nationalism, wrapping it up in the Bible and kind of making one the other and the other the one. If you, in other words, nationalism is the Christian thing to do, and the Christian thing to do is to be nationalist, and that is not necessarily true at all. So fascism, to sort of summarize it, in fact, let's go to another screen here, and I think this will help us summarize it because, this may not be a term that is very familiar to a lot of people. Um, let's define an actual fascist. A fascist is someone who claims to speak for a whole nation or group, is utterly unconcerned with the rights of others, and is willing to use violence and whatever other means are necessary to achieve the goals he or she might have. Sounds a whole lot like Donald Trump, quite frankly. Um, and one last thing before, Chloe, I'll let you say whatever parting comments you want to say in terms of defining fascism. Um, but yes, another really, really important point about fascism is, as we read, it is not about the rights of the people. It is not about the rights of the people. The liberties that we enjoy as Americans, um, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those are civil liberties and civil rights that under fascism will be taken away by the dictator, by the authoritarian uh, person, by the autocrat, in the ruling party. In the case of Germany, it was, as you said, Hitler. In the Third Reich, um, Hitler and the Germany people against the Jewish people. So personal individual rights are also in jeopardy under fascism. I think about the importance of the media. A lot of things we would not know. Now, the media has its own problems, and man, they can be so biased and can really put out a lot of disinformation. But it's still good to have a media that is not controlled by the dictator, like in Russia. A lot of the Russian people right now don't even understand the war that's going on in Ukraine because the Russian government controls the media there. There's a state media. That is another very terrifying, almost, aspect of fascism.
Yeah, and in that vein, one last thing I want to point out with defining fascism or how to recognize it is that fascist regimes themselves are pretty revolutionary. They don't seem like it at the time because typically what they do is to advance their own interests, they will use highly conservative ideologies to get into power. And we see that with MAGA, with Make America Great Again, related to racism, the role of women, social hierarchy, obedience to authority. So I mean, it's pretty revolutionary to take America, who went through a bloody revolutionary war from Great Britain to establish a democratic republic, to then, 200 plus years later, to try to put in someone like Trump to be this single powerful supreme leader. And if you disagree with him or have political dissent, then you don't love America or you're not American. That's revolutionary. But they couch it, they put it a pretty bow about it to say, well, look, we just want to take America back to what it was when you were able to work a job and, be able to retire off that job, when the roles of men and women were defined, when, you could be a white American and advance because of your race, etc. So they put this ugly feeling inside of a pretty bow to get to the revolutionary state or regime of having this single all powerful leader. And they're
All
typically
right.
very, very charismatic too. I want to point that out too. Donald Trump is
Great.
charismatic. He brings drama. He makes you pay attention. That's what these powerful leaders need.
Yes. So was Mao Zedong. So was Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, um, um, Vladimir Putin. You could go right down the list. Very good point. Now, let's go back to Madeleine Albright's book. And before we do, listen, you all, you rebels, those of you who tune in to our channel every week, listen, we are intellectuals. Um, we bring you intellectualism. We bring you what you need to understand the country that we live in and what is happening all around us. If we don't understand these things, then we're subject to allow the past to repeat itself. And the past is ugly for African Americans. And Trump, the GOP, are trying to take us back there. And we got to educate ourselves so that we can stop that from happening. So that's why we started this channel. Now, everyone, we also, and Chloe, we talked about it this morning. Chloe said, yeah, we are definitely intellectuals, but we're also, especially her, I'm also a young person, and I also want to talk about some other things sometimes too, except this heavy stuff. So we do that too, right? We spend a good amount of time talking about, for example, the Tory Lanez trial where he was convicted of shooting Megan the Stallion, and many other videos that we do. But for the most part, we are intellectuals, and we're going to bring you the intellectual information that you need to understand how to fight the forces that are trying to once again relegate African Americans to second class citizenship. They have been hard at this for a long time. They play a long game. They're not sprinters. They are marathon runners. And I say it for the third time. Many African Americans are not woke and realize what's been going on. But we're going to share it with you today. Chloe, before I go back to Madeleine Albright's book, you got something you want to say right there?
I mean, yeah, we're like a healthy, balanced diet. We give you the serious, we give you the real, but we also like to have some fun while still being providing knowledge and being entertainment. So if you like all of that, you're gonna love this channel, the content that we put out.
Very good. All right. This is a good book, you all. You should get it. Fascism, A Warning by Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State. She wrote this book in 2018. All right, this is a rather lengthy passage, but we got to read it. It's so important. In January 1991, George H.W. Bush, that's old man Bush, I believe.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's him.
Is Yeah,
Hmm.
this is old man Bush. Okay. George Herbert Walker Bush told Congress that the end of the Cold War has been a victory for all humanity, and America's leadership was instrumental in making it possible. Across the Atlantic, Havel added, Europe is attempting to create a historically new kind of order through the process of unification, a Europe in which no one more powerful will be able to suppress anyone less powerful, in which it will no longer be possible to settle disputes with force. So this was a good moment. The Soviet Union was broken up, and America was applauding the fact that the Cold War was therefore over. You know, our country was not trying to fight um, the Soviet Union for control of Vietnam or control of Korea. That was over. That's what she was saying here. Today, more than a quarter century later, we must ask what has happened to that uplifting vision. Why does it seem to be fading instead of becoming more clear? Why, per Freedom House, is democracy now under assault and in retreat? Why are many people in positions of power seeking to undermine public confidence in elections, the courts, the media, and on the fundamental question of Earth's future, science? Why have such dangerous splits been allowed to develop between rich and poor, urban and rural, those with a higher education and those without? Why has the United States, at least temporarily, abdicated its leadership in world affairs? And why, this far into the 21st century, are we once again talking about fascism? Here's why. One reason, frankly, is Donald Trump. If we think of fascism as a wound from the past that had almost healed, putting Trump in the White House was like ripping off that bandage and picking up the scab. To the political class of Washington, D.C., Republican, Democrat, Independent alike, the election of Trump was so startling, it would have caused an all time silent film comedian to clench his hat with both hands, yank it over his ears, leap in the air, and land flat on his back. The United States has had flawed presidents before. In fact, we've never had any other kind. But we have not had a chief executive in the modern era whose statements and actions are so at odds with democratic ideas. From the early stages of his campaign and right into the Oval Office, Donald Trump has spoken harshly about the institutions and principles that make up the foundation of open government. In the process, he has systemically degraded political discourse in the United States, shown in astonishing disregard for facts, libeled his predecessors, threatened to lock up political rivals, referred to mainstream journalists as the enemy of the American people, spread falsehoods about the integrity of the U.S. electoral process, touted mindlessly nationalistic economic and trade policies, vilified immigrants in the countries from which they come, and nurtured a paranoid bigotry toward the followers of one of the world's foremost religions. Trump is the first anti democratic president in modern U.S. history. On too many days, beginning in the early hours, he flaunts his disdain for democratic institutions, the ideals of equality and social justice, civil discord, civic virtues, and America itself. If transplanted to a country with fewer democratic safeguards, he would audition for dictator because that is where his instincts lead. That was a lengthy reading. In fact, some people probably left, but again, we are intellectuals. We read books, literally read books. So, listen, folks, be open when we are putting forth this information. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just not talking about, again, Tory Lance and Flavor Flav and Boosie and so on. We're giving you something that can really, that you really, really, really need to so that we can stop what's going on in this country. So, Chloe, that was a lot. What do you say to all of that?
Yeah, speaking of reading books, these are the type of books that we read every day. So I wanted to just show the people that if you can see it. Um
Yes.
Basically what I took from all of that is, and I read this from a philosopher, that Trump, he started sort of as this cult of personality, cult of leader who promises to restore a national identity. We're talking about that extreme nationalism. And he does that by deriding his political enemies, supposed communists, liberals, immigrants, black folks, etc. And that basically only he and himself can solve all of these issues. In layman's terms, that's what I get from what Secretary Albright is saying, and we've seen that happen, and we're seeing it happen now. I want to read what one philosopher defined fascism as Roger Griffin. He says that it has three core components: the rebirth myth, populist ultranationalism, and the myth of
Is
decadence.
actually to reduce the
I think that that is exactly what we're seeing here today. You know, the rebirth myth about how America needs to be reborn, make America great again. Let's go back to where we were. That populist, ultra natural nationalism, which is that extreme association with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism that we see in this country, and then the myth of decadence. And Donald Trump comes with a lot of that. I mean, he was born with a gilded spoon in his mouth. He has definitely lived a decadent lifestyle, and he brought that with him with the presidency and with him rerunning as well. So it's just this cult of personality in association with mass control and lying. Lying. That's what a lot of historians and philosophers have said that fascism relies on. The massive populations, they don't care about the truth, and the fascist leaders don't care about telling the truth either. It's about building this regime on lies, lying, and fear.
Very good. And for me, in a nutshell, what she's saying is Trump is and has been undermining our democratic institutions so that he will be positioned to become the supreme leader, the autocrat, um, the dictator. He can't do that so long as these institutions are in place, like the media. You know, when Trump was president and telling all those lies about COVID and lies about so many other things, it was the media that was fact checking him. You know, some media, right? Not Fox, some media. And that's why he hated them, because as long as they were fact checking him, he couldn't tell his lies, and he couldn't get the disinformation out there, which hindered his ability to take over things. Okay. And the sad part is, Chloe, his style, his charisma, as you talked about, has spread. It has spread like wildfire across this country. And GOP states, including Tennessee, the one we're getting ready to switch our attention to, is no exception. White Americans are fearful. White Americans have been very fearful since the election of Barack Obama. They fear a takeover. And Donald Trump is their great white hope to prevent that from happening. It is not by accident that he started out his campaign by coming down the escalators and attacking Mexicans as rapists and murderers. That was all a part of the plan and the strategy with the wild approval of the GOP, the right wing, and white conservatives. Because again, they feel like between blacks and Mexicans, they're losing their country. So they're in fear. And Donald Trump speaks to that fear. And in their opinion, he is their only hope of addressing that fear of losing their country, like it's not our country, right? And so we see this playing out in states across the country, here in our state of Texas and other states. We're going to look at the control that the GOP has over states in just a moment. Chloe, you sent over a video by one of the young men in Tennessee, one of the former state representatives that was expelled by the GOP-led Tennessee state legislature. I think he sort of sums up what we are dealing with here very well. So can we go ahead and play that video?
Yes.
Here it is.
Representative Gloria Johnson and her attorneys, who they too are seeking to expel right before I speak and before they work to expel me, which I expect to happen too. We are losing our democracy. This is not normal. This is not okay. If you look at what it takes to expel a member, or what it should take, most of the times that a member in the Tennessee state legislature have gotten expelled, in the last 2 times in particular, one, the guy committed sexual assault against 22 people. The other committed bribery. We broke a House rule because we're fighting for kids who are dying from gun violence and people in our communities who want to see an end to the proliferation of weaponry in our communities, and that leads to our expulsion. This is not democracy. This is not what it is supposed to look like, and everybody needs to be very afraid and very worried that there are people in positions of power who are using and wielding that power to expel people who are duly elected to their seats. We came here to fight for our constituents. We came here to lift up the issues of people who are suffering. 6 people died in Nashville at the Covenant School. 3 were 9 years old. But instead of focusing on that, Representative Jones, Representative Johnson, and myself are being expelled from the State House because we said we cannot do business as usual. No one should be wanting to operate as though this is not happening, as though we are not living in a gun violence epidemic in the state of Tennessee. And the solutions that are being offered is actually to reduce the First Amendment rights of people who speak up on behalf of their constituencies, who speak up on behalf of people who are tired of the guns, who are tired of seeing legislation being passed that lowers the age for you to carry, tired of seeing legislation being passed that says you don't need a permit, tired of legislation being passed that says if we give teachers guns, that's somehow going to fix the problem. People are tired of these non-real solutions to a real problem that we are suffering from. I've lost a classmate this year from gun violence. My mentor died last year from gun violence. We are dealing with a gun violence epidemic, and the resolution is not to
All right, there we go. I brought that using my iPad, so good luck with how it works. But I want to say this, that I stand with these 3 folks who were expelled, or 2, pardon me. In fact, let me bring up now, because that's a pretty big deal, the fact that there were 3 of them who started out, but only the 2 black representatives were expelled. So here's a picture of the 3 that started out protesting. But I need to say this. I need to say that I don't agree with their position on guns. Okay? I am a huge Second Amendment defender. So I disagree with what they're advocating as far as guns are concerned. But I strongly back their right to do what they feel they need to do to try to protect life. Um, I strongly, strongly disagree with the GOP, with the Tennessee GOP controlled legislature that expelled them like this. I think this was the second time in American history that Tennessee has done this. And it is very, very deeply concerning when a GOP state legislature can just kick out two duly elected black representatives. And I feel that way despite disagreeing with them on some of the, some of the stance that they take to deal with school shootings. But I believe what happened to them is anti-democratic. It goes back to this fascism. I think it is extremely anti-democratic. The people of their districts elected them, and other politicians should not be able to just kick them out because they disagree with the position they took. And lastly, I'm not a Democrat or Republican, so I'm not coming at this from a political position or ideology.
So I want to point out to people and highlight why the three representatives were protesting, and why they were expelled, or two of them were expelled in the first place. As we know, last week there were 6 people who were killed in Tennessee, three of which were children. And on March 30th in Tennessee, hundreds of protesters went to Tennessee State Capitol in Nashville, and they were calling for tighter gun control laws. Um, During that, protesters, they lined up inside the hallways. They were exercising their First Amendment rights in regards to the tragic shooting of those 6 people. On the House floor, those 3 individuals that you see in the screen now, Jones, who is in the middle, Justin Jones, former Representative Justice Jones, and former Representative Justin Pearson, they led chants with a bullhorn as the legislators were in the Texas legislature. Okay.
Tennessee.
And so, excuse me, Tennessee. So, um, um, apparently this was filmed by Republicans. And look, there are some house rules of decorum that Republicans said that these former representatives violated. But the point is that these former representatives were speaking up about issues that they're passionate about, that I assume that their constituents wanted them to speak up about. Former Representative Pearson, he represented the 86th district, which was parts of the city of Memphis, and we know about the gun violence that happens in Memphis. We know about, the rappers who have been dead because of gun violence. So he was speaking up for people who elected him. And so the fact that the Republicans, someone else brought this up, didn't refer the issue to an ethics committee or give them a warning, but they immediately went to expelling them from their positions. We know why. And we know why the 3 people who participated, the 2 who were actually expelled, were black. It's because of racism. And what the Republicans probably didn't know is that by the expulsion hearing that they had, it gave these young black men national exposure, 6 hours to get on the Tennessee House floor and speak about their positions and their passions. If you didn't know about them, you know them now. And
That's
just
true.
listening to Justin Pearson talk, I mean, amazing, amazing. And I was doing some history about him, Dad. I just want to tell the people a little bit about his political career. He was elected this year, January 23rd, 2023. He is the son of a preacher and a teacher. He's from Tennessee. And he was on the debate team at his school, and he has been advocating for justice and for equality from a young age, and he's only 28 years old. So I mean, this is just impressive, and it's sad. It is so sad and infuriating that instead of addressing the concerns about citizens of Tennessee about gun violence, they chose to go after these two young black men. It is outrageous. And it's the reason why we wanted to talk about this topic today. Um, another thought that I had before I turn it back over to you, Dad, is with Pearson and with Jones, even if in your case, like, you don't agree with what they were advocating for, why did their colleagues not use this moment to come together to try to form some type of consensus to address the gun violence that is happening in this country? We talked about this in detail last week. So, and it's just blatant what they were doing. And I was reading when Pearson, when he was first elected, he wore a dashiki to his swearing in ceremony, and that outraged the Republicans from the beginning. So they've been gunning after these two young men from the beginning, and this was an excuse for them to do what they did. So it's infuriating.
Just further proof of the rise of Trumpism and fascism. I mean, that's what it is. And the GOP, when they control the legislature the way they do, then they do what they want to do. And why is that? Oftentimes, it is because African Americans are not voting in high enough numbers. Take a state like Mississippi. Mississippi has many African Americans, yet African Americans are not in, pretty much virtually are non-existent in the state government. I mean, it's maybe 30 to 40% black, the state, Mississippi. So what are we seeing here? What are we seeing? Why are we African Americans not voting? Why are we standing by and allowing the GOP to exercise all of this totalitarianism, authoritarianism, this rise of Trumpism and fascism? I mean, why are we standing back and allowing this to happen? It is time to make our voices heard. Now, Chloe, one of the things that oh, I don't know what happened there, but let me see. Chloe, something happened. I don't know what happened.
I'm here, but I'm back. I see we're still on the air.
Okay. Never had this happen.
We're live, you all. So
You never had this happen. I don't know what went down. I don't know, but it was pretty serious. Pretty serious. Pretty serious. We're going to continue. Let me go back to my iPad. All right, so in 1980, the GOP controlled about 15 state houses. Today, what is that, 40 years later, they control about 31, 32. Why is that important? That is important because they're exercising or executing a takeover using precinct strategy. They're taking over one state at a time. They're taking over by focusing on precincts in states. Okay? Now, why is that important? Here's how it works. The key is conservatives attend local Republican. I'm quoting, this is a quote from a guy who sort of developed this strategy. And talking to other conservatives, he said, the key is you and your fellow conservatives attending your local Republican Party committee meeting every month. That takes about 2 hours a month, where you can learn how to become a voting member of the party, a precinct committeeman. And so they want to take control of the actual precincts in a voting jurisdiction. Now, the reason they want to do that, Chloe, is because they want to take over these states. Let me go back for a minute. This is real important right here. Real important right here. They want, if you see that line on that graph that's about a third of the way up, or 2/3 of the way up, 1/3 from the top, 2/3 majority, 34 states. So the Republicans are trying to get control of 34 of the United States. 34 of the United States. Why is that number so important? Why is that number important? There is a reason why they want 34 states, or 2/3 majority. Let me tell you why. Here's why. Because they want to amend the Constitution. They want to call a Constitution Convention. Article 5 of the United States Constitution requires this before they can call a Constitution Convention to amend the Constitution. It reads, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. Now, that's the way that most amendments have been done. There have been about 25, 26, maybe 27 amendments to the Constitution. Most of them have occurred because 2/3 of both houses thought it necessary. This last way, notice the word or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So there are two ways that a Constitution Convention can occur. One is if Congress does it. The other is if 2/3 of the state legislatures do it. And the Republican Party, the GOP, right now, go back, has about 32 states. The last state that they gained control of was North Carolina. Just this past week, North Carolina has always been a state where the governor has oftentimes been Democrat, mostly Democrat, but then the legislature has been Republican. And that's the case here now. Roy Cooper is the governor of North Carolina, but the GOP control the legislature. And they've had a supermajority control. Now, even though they had a supermajority control, Roy Cooper could still veto bills. But this past week, a Democrat switched parties and became a Republican, giving the GOP in a veto-proof supermajority. So now they can override the governor. So if they put forth a bill and the governor vetoes it, they got enough voting power now to overcome or overturn his veto, which means they can do whatever they want to now do. So North Carolina now is like the state of Texas. It's like the state of Florida and other Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, states where the GOP are in absolute control. And so we know what's going to happen. We're going to see more of this stuff like in Tennessee. We're going to see more banning books like Ruby Bridges, banning of books by Toni Morrison, banning books by or on Rosa Parks, because they're trying to erase history. So they got a game plan here. So that's what I'm trying to say. They get 34 states to sign on. They can call a Constitution Convention. And if they can call a Constitution Convention, they then can offer amendments to the Constitution. For example, just for example, you're talking about gun control laws. They can amend the Constitution to where states, to where there can be no gun control laws. They can amend the Constitution to where, look, you might think it's outrageous. They could amend the Constitution to reestablish slavery. I'm not kidding. I'm not joking. They could amend the Constitution to do whatever if they get 34 states, and they still need, however, back to this amendment, they still, back to the Article 5, they still, Chloe, would need they still would need 3/4 of the states to ratify the amendment. But at least they could call the Constitution Convention and start the process. This is, Chloe, this is dangerous. This is their strategy. So let me just, and I'm getting ready to stop. So their focus is on state elections. Their focus is on taking over precincts. Because the precinct chairperson controls that precinct and can just say, you didn't win that election. Let's say you ran for office, Chloe, and a precinct chairperson has robust power and doesn't like you. Well, I'm not declaring her the winner of this precinct. So they are focused on precincts so that they can take over states. And once they have at least 34 states on board, they can call a Constitution Convention, amend the Constitution in whatever ways they want, assuming they got 3/4 states of the states ratifying what they're doing, and virtually do anything. And I'm mostly concerned about our rights as African Americans. We were, under the law of this nation, we were enslaved. Because of the law, we had to fight a civil war and add the 13th Amendment. Well, they can add a 28th Amendment saying we are reestablishing slavery. Or we add an amendment where you can never get reparations. Or we add an amendment where women no longer can vote. Or we add an amendment where any black person who has had a speeding ticket can't vote. Or a black person who doesn't own land can't vote. I mean, they can do whatever if they get control of these states and can amend the Constitution like that.
Well, this goes back to Trump, the GOP takeover, and fascism. One of the leading proponents of this convention of states that we're talking about under the Article 5 is a former Trump lawyer, John Eastman, who has pushed for narrow revisions of the Constitution that would, quote, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And what does that mean for Black people? We know that it has been the federal government that has added amendments that have given us rights under the law. We know that it was, the federal government that enacted the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and other acts that have offered us protections. We've often had to go to the federal government to step in to help protect us and protect our communities. So when you have Trump people who want to have this convention of states to bypass the federal government, to bypass the president's signatures, to bypass Congress, United States Congress, to put these amendment ins. We know that that will likely spell disaster. It's one of the reasons why we've always tended to be on the side, whichever party was more on the side of big government, because we know that's where a lot of our protections have come from. And that this has been a fight that's been going on since the South lost the Civil War in the mid 1800s. You know, it was flipped back then. The two parties, the Republican parties, were the ones who were anti slavery, pro United States. The Democrats were the ones who were, pro slavery, etc. The parties have changed, but not the ideology and not the thinking. And the thinking has been, we need to limit the federal government in order for us to limit rights of Black people in this country. That's what it truly boils down to. And in terms of, okay, what does it mean to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government? That could be limiting the power of the 14th Amendment, which provides the equal
That's right.
protection clause. You know,
Exactly right.
equal protection under the law. That could be limiting the power of the Fifth Amendment, of all of these amendments of the 13th Amendment that got rid of slavery, except in certain cases when you're convicted of a felony. So this could really have extremely dire consequences for Black people in this country, and so many people do not know about it. So many people are, as you say, that not woke. And the GOP likes to throw around this woke term and just classify all Black people as woke, when the opposite is far from the truth. Because a lot of us in our community do not have this knowledge, or because of the trauma that we've suffered and our post traumatic slave disorder mentality, we don't want to focus um, on the trauma that is still occurring today. But this is I'm trying to think of a good word to encompass how dire this is. If they were able to have this convention of states and try to limit all of these protections, it would just be devastating. Um, and finally, my final thoughts are: this is why voting is so important, and voting in local and state elections, because this so-called strategy from the GOP, the Convention of States, it could not occur if there were not elected officials and state legislatures who were a part of that GOP takeover. It could not occur if we had more people who would come out who were informed, knowledgeable, voting, participating in elections that our ancestors gave their lives for, by the way. And then to have this democratic society and not participate in it is a slap in the face to every person who tried to vote, who was spit on, who were killed, who were ostracized, all of that. So we need to stand up and shout from the rooftops how important this democratic process is, because there is a constant strategy behind the scenes to decay our systems of government, to decay our voices as people, and to decay our rights and liberties under this country as well. So get woke, folks. That is not a word that we should run from. We should be proud to be woke and to have the knowledge to fight those forces as well.
Well said. All right, that is going to bring us to the conclusion of today's show. We apologize for whatever happened. I don't know what really happened. Quite frankly, I'll find out once we get off the air. But this is live television. This is not recorded, where I would have been able to edit out any interruptions like that. This is live as it happens to us. You're seeing it live on television. So we apologize. I don't know what happened, but I'll find out. You can be sure of that. But don't let it cause you not to take this information very, very seriously. Like Chloe said, if they can call a Constitution Convention and start amending the Constitution to build in even more white supremacy. There's already a lot of white supremacist clauses in the Constitution still to this day. But if they can get the opportunity to build it in more, sort of a 2023 version of Jim Crow, it could be ugly for us, especially. The Civil Rights Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, that could be washed away. Brown versus Board of Education could be washed away. We could go back to separate but equal. I mean, it could get very, very, very ugly. And they are working on this strategy, and they're almost there. Okay, so again, take it very seriously. We hope you all enjoyed the broadcast. We hope you got something from it. But that's going to do it for us today. Chloe, if you don't have any other words, that's going to end it for today.
Y'all take care. Thank you for joining and watching.